All right. How's it going? So this is the most impromptu stream I've ever done in my entire life. I normally prep for things and, have some idea of the information I'm going to go through, but I don't today. I was already dressed. I came on to shoot a different video that I had already prepped. And then this news broke. So I figured, why not go online, give people an outlet here to share their thoughts. I don't know. Look, I'm in Canada, right? This doesn't directly impact me, but this is going to impact millions and millions and millions of people. And culture in the US often bleeds up into Canada and into the rest of the world, and it's definitely part of why I'm focused on American politics. So this is just devastating. We knew it was coming, so it's not, I guess, shocking. But there's another part to it. And I'm going to say that this part isn't shocking either because this was also discussed, but I'll get to it really quickly. So first, you know this. Actually, let me go small. Make this a little, let me go down here. And I'll take your chats, super chat, random chats, whatever, just to, get your thoughts on all this. But so here it is. The Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade, eliminating the constitutional right to abortion, now leaving it up to the states. So, of course, depending on the state you're in, you may be fine. But this creates a massive crisis for millions of people. Now, look, I could read through this, but do you really want me to? I don't think anybody wants that. This is incredibly long. I may get to, I think Thomas wrote the decision, so I may get to a piece of what he said. But this, I think, is even more telling. Clarence Thomas just filed a concurring opinion to Dobbs calling for the court to consider overturning the right to contraception, same-sex marriage, and privacy in the bedroom. Like, where do you go from here? And by the way, frauds like Dave Rubin, a gay conservative who's before this came out, said, "Oh, this would never happen. What are you talking about?" What's he going to say to this now? Is he going to all of a sudden, turn straight just to keep those checks rolling in? People are fucking disgusting. And ultimately, this is conservative media, and of course, money on the right is what led to this. 40 years of this investment into from the Federalist Society, from Fox News, laying the groundwork for all of this, AM radio. This was their project for decades. And this is like, understand, it's never going to end. There's never going to be a place where they're satisfied, where it's like, okay, now we're good. No, it's going to just keep getting worse. Look, I don't know how long I'm going to spend on this because honestly, what is there to say? But I will say what I think Democrats should be doing or planning to do right now. Because they're not going to, in terms of what is happening now with them in power, the answer is nothing. Now you could say it's, Joe Manchin and the filibuster, he doesn't want to do anything, and cinema. Ultimately, it's Joe Biden, who is the president, has a lot more power than he is using, is unwilling to even publicly criticize Manchin, which then goes to say, does Biden actually care about trying to do anything, maybe expanding the court, maybe blowing up the court to 1,000 pieces? Like, not literally, obviously, like in terms of what he can do with his power, in terms of what Democrats can try to do right now. They can attempt to either delegitimize the court or expand it. There is nothing written in the Constitution saying you only need, 9 people in the court. They can keep going. DV says, like, honestly, a revolution is needed right now. Yeah, I hear you. Look, I'm going to see who's reported on this because I'm one person. I'm not going to go through this freaking document and look for, the important points. That's not happening. We will be here for 5 days. So I'm going to check online. See, assuming some of them got this early, already taken out the relevant portions, and quote some of this for you. All right, let's go to Al Jazeera, which is usually pretty good. So 6-3 vote, of course. By the way, 6-3 vote. 3 picks there by Donald Trump. I distinctly remember, look, I'm not blaming anybody who's an individual who has no power, who thought, I'm not going to vote, these 2 choices are terrible in 2016, but people that have a platform, that have the ability to influence others, that you'd think would care about this stuff, at least pretended to care about human rights. Back then we're saying, oh, this Trump, there's no chance Trump would have 2 picks, even 3 picks. Completely insane. In fact, the moon falling into Lake Michigan, that could also happen. That has a better chance of happening than Trump having 3 picks. Well, how'd that turn out? So if you had a platform and were in a position of power and you acted instead in your own best financial interests, look, back in 2016, it was like my first year doing this stuff, basically. And I was, of course, big Bernie Sanders supporter, criticized Hillary Clinton endlessly. Then it came down to the election in 2016. I could have gone with, following where all the right-wing money was in terms of saying, oh, no, don't vote at all or vote for Trump. But I followed, I don't know, principles, morals, and was like, hey, maybe you don't want this complete lunatic to, at the very least, be filling the courts. But what do I know? So more than 24 U.S. states are likely to ban abortion now that that has been overturned, according to reproductive rights groups Guttmacher Institute, a move that rights groups say disproportionately harms low-income women and communities of color. Of course, because if you're wealthy, you can cross the border, cross state lines, or go to a different country and get the procedure done, which is just a medical procedure. That's how it's viewed in other countries, in other cultures. By the way, like, abortion is, it's so normal everywhere else. You know, sometimes you hear people try and compare the far right in America to like I don't know, what do they call them? Like Islamic extremists or like Sharia law. Abortion is perfectly fine under Sharia law. So this is worse. So, you know, there's no, and I find those comparisons to be quasi, you know, xenophobic or racist, where it's just, no, there's a Christian white nationalism in America that is its own thing. You don't have to compare it to other far right movements in any other culture. No, this is, America has its own far right Christian white nationalism. That's what this is. So it is much further right than the vast majority of others around the world. So in the ruling, the justice held that the 73 Roe v. Wade decision that legislated abortions performed before a fetus would be viable outside the womb between 24 and 28 weeks of pregnancy was wrongly decided because the U.S. Constitution makes no specific mention of abortion rights. It also makes no specific mention of the Supreme freaking Court. Roe v. Wade ruling had argued that the right to personal privacy under the U.S. Constitution protects a woman's ability to terminate their pregnancy, which is why you then go back to this, in case you're coming late to this story. They're also exploring this idea. Thomas filed a concurring opinion to Dobbs calling for the court to consider overturning the right to contraception, same-sex marriage, and privacy in the bedroom. So in 92, the Supreme Court ruling called Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey reaffirmed abortion rights and prohibited laws imposing an undue burden on abortion access. Conservative Justice Samuel Alito, in the final opinion issued Friday, wrote that Roe and Planned Parenthood v. Casey were wrong the day they were decided and must be overturned. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, Alito wrote. Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett also voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. The latter three, of course, are Trump appointees. Meanwhile, John Roberts would have stopped short of ending the abortion right, noting in the ruling that he would have upheld the Mississippi law at the heart of the case, a ban on abortion after 15 weeks, and said no more. So Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan were in dissent. Quote, with sorrow for this court, but more for the many millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection, we dissent. Opinion polls show a majority of Americans support abortion rights, but overturning Roe has been a goal of anti-abortion activists and Christian conservatives for decades, with annual marches in Washington, including in January of this year. There is a lot that needs to be done. The Senate should be abolished. It is inherently undemocratic. You have 2 senators representing Wyoming and 2 for California and New York. Like the population sizes compared to these states and the same amount of people represented them is just completely insane. And the courts, at the very least, look, I'm not a legal expert in this, but my understanding is they can be expanded with people that are currently in power meaning Democratic lawmakers, and there is an unwillingness at this point to do anything to actually address these underlying issues, these institutions that have allowed this to happen, have allowed the tiny minority of people with a lot of money and their supporters, still a tiny minority, to overrule the interests of the majority. This has happened again and again. When was the last time a Republican president actually won a majority of voters? Was it Bush, the second run? I don't know, but it's been a while. So you have here, and not to mention, I mean, the Senate, while it's split 50-50, there are millions of more people that voted for the Democratic senators compared to Republican, just because of, again, the makeup of these states. Yeah, if anyone's spamming, I will ban you. So chill out. Actually, here, I may have to institute a little slow mode. Here, let's start with 30 seconds. This way you don't just spam the chat. All right. So as I said at the beginning of this, I was about to shoot a different video and like pre-record it to post it today. I had already planned a video. I'm still going to shoot it at some point, maybe later today or tomorrow. But part of that video, near the end, I might as well discuss here what I was going to discuss there, since it still applies. And this is, putting aside what Democrats can do right now, which we discussed a bit of that already, what they should be planning for 2024. And look, also important to know before I discuss any of this, electoral politics clearly has limitations. So, you have to get involved in other ways if you can. I understand people are busy. I'm busy. I work all the time. I'm sure a lot of you work all the time. But there has to be, in terms of union power, just labor power generally, activist groups, like that's where a lot of the actual progress is. That's where it's generated. Because without that, you have no power at all over these institutions or over these lawmakers. Breeze, thank you for becoming a member. Ariok, thank you for your super chat. Lawn Gnomes says, would be great to get... Did I read this already? No. Would be great to get someone from SCOTUS to advocate for expanding the core to 13 plus. Yeah. That Democratic leadership is, this is happening under their watch. Like, I hope at the very least for diehard Democratic voters, especially those, no offense to if you're in this age group, but this is generally who we're talking about when it comes to these morons voting these same idiots in every time. Hopefully, generation really X plus stops voting for people like Pelosi or Biden or Schumer. Like, you really have to primary all of these individuals that allowed this to happen. Now, of course, yes, this is the fault of the Republican Party, clearly. But without an actual opposition, and it's funny calling the Democrats the opposition when they're in power. They have the power. But they are basically the opposition here because who's running the show? It's not Democrats. So by having such a weak leadership as the opposition to this rising fascism, like, what do you expect to happen? Like, it's frustrating for me as somebody who, look, I view myself as not somebody who is really all that intelligent, for lack of a better term. And the reason why I don't have a better term is because I'm not intelligent. But the one skill I do have is my ability to tell who knows what they're talking about and who actually is standing up for the rights of individuals, the rights of the marginalized, the rights of the working class, human rights generally. It's very clear when you read more and understand who controls things and where the power is, that the left has been right about everything for decades. The problem is the left doesn't have money because they are critical of the foundation of society, which is capitalism. So because they are highly critical of that, it's very hard for the left to gain any real power, because to gain power, you sort of need that money or access to that money to be able to gain power. Now, Bernie Sanders helped to kind of blow that idea up, at least in terms of it on a national level, showing that you can run a national campaign by raising small dollars, and would have been successful if it wasn't for the millions of media dollars benefiting Hillary Clinton, benefiting Joe Biden, that went to, once again, brainwash those diehard voters that vote in Democratic primaries. That was always the issue with Bernie. In case you're wondering, like a lot of people think, Bernie couldn't win the primary in 2016 or 2020, so how could he have beat Trump? Because they are very different. The general election and the primary is very, very different. To win a primary, you have to win over typical Democratic voters that largely skew older, that largely listen to garbage like MSNBC and CNN, that don't really know reality, that are just brainwashed by what corporations are telling them. To win a general, you have to be able to appeal to a much wider swath of people, because a lot more people come out to vote, are able to vote. Many states in Democratic primaries are closed primaries. So unless you're a registered Democrat and have been for a while, you can't even vote. So an independent senator who is running against corporate power is not going to have a great time in a primary that is partially closed off, but also typically the general public does not show up to a primary and isn't viable to vote in a primary. Whereas a general, someone like Bernie has that mass appeal and is able to bring those people out. So that's why there's that difference there between the primary and a general. And of course, him being an independent, that's an asset in a general election, being an independent senator, whereas it's a liability in a primary. But anyways, all of this is to say that Biden has to be challenged. If he is going to run again, and I'm sure his ego will make him run again, he has to be challenged by a robust number of people, like not just one person. Start the primary off. This is how you make it a legitimate primary, because one person challenging Biden in 2024 from the left is not going to be taken seriously. But if you have, just in a perfect world here, because this is not, unfortunately, the way things are right now, the way these politicians operate, this is not realistic. But in a perfect world, if Biden's running again, you'd have Bernie Sanders, John Fetterman, Nina Turner, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, more. Just all of them challenge Biden at once. Further, in doing that, you then legitimize the idea of taking down, of primarying a sitting Democratic president. Biden is deeply unpopular. His, the familiarity that he brought with 2020 and why a lot of people were attracted to him as a candidate, the idea of like bringing back the Obama years. That's what that big appeal was to a lot of primary voters. Now that that warm hug of familiarity has worn off and the reality of a Joe Biden presidency has set in, that familiarity from 2008 is not going to carry Biden into a second term. He will lose. And especially considering the more I'm reading, the more I'm realizing that Ron DeSantis is going to be the nominee for Republicans in 2024. It's not going to be Trump. It's going to be DeSantis. People that watch conservative media in large numbers, more so than just regular conservatives, are now siding with DeSantis over Trump. And DeSantis, as you've seen in recent polls, as I'll cover in a different video, he's now beating Trump. And sure, it's by small numbers right now. It's just starting, but that's going to continue. And Biden has zero chance against DeSantis. Democrats have to run somebody who is different. This is why I pick out Fetterman, even though Fetterman still, hasn't become a senator, may lose against Dr. Oz. God, I hope not, but he may lose against Dr. Oz. But someone like him who is both visually different and also in terms of what he stands for, what his rhetoric is different in terms of an actual fighter for the working class, is unafraid to support cannabis legalization, and just generally is viewed as more of a union kind of guy. And he's somebody who, as I've said before, he looks like a retired pro wrestler. Like he looks like a different kind of person. And that is beneficial when it comes to a presidential election. That's the kind of person that voters are looking for now, especially those that don't normally vote. Those are the people that Democrats need to win. You're going to win those diehard voters regardless. Like people that would vote, like people that voted for Biden in 2020, that were happy to vote for him. Maybe they don't find a Bernie Sanders or a John Fetterman appealing. But if that's the choice versus Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump, they're going to vote for the Democrat because that's the Democrat. So those voters are locked up. The voters you need to get are the people that just generally stay home, younger voters especially. So Biden has fallen off completely with younger voters, and he's not going to appeal to them by continuing to do nothing. And he will, because he is Biden, he will continue to do nothing and say, oh, I need more senators. How about, I don't know, do something that you promised that you have the power to do. Take cannabis out of a Schedule I drug. You have the power to do that. You said you would decriminalize cannabis. Why have you said nothing about that since? Biden supported a public option. Do you remember that? That was viewed as that's the more moderate. That's what voters want. They want a nice moderate who supports a public option. Well, even if you thought that was moderate, which is stupid, Medicare for all is actually the moderate position. But even if you thought a public option was the moderate position, where has that conversation gone? He hasn't even mentioned those words since being elected. People are tired with this sort of politics. The over-promising and under-delivering is a serious issue with Democratic politicians in particular, because a lot of them understand they have to play progressive, at least in some areas, act like they're going to do something, and they ultimately do nothing. So when they fail again and again and again, and are the same ones being propped up by big dollars, you have to understand that message no longer works. And you need to have someone there who is not attached to that money, who is able to act as someone who is independent, somebody who listens to the public, who reacts, who responds, who does what is necessary to help the most amount of people, being the working class, do what is necessary to help them, despite the fact that it may offend some capitalists. Like, that's what Democrats need right now. And so, I'm afraid it's not going to happen, just because of the way that these politicians operate, more particularly like in the Democratic side. Like, I don't see Fetterman, even someone like Fetterman, I don't see him challenging Biden. Bernie, I don't see him challenging Biden. Again, assuming Biden is going to run for a second term. I just don't see them doing this. They're too afraid to offend those that hold power within the party. And as long as you're afraid of that, you are risking and almost guaranteeing a further move to the right and an obvious slide into a fascist. So let me grab some super chats here. I'm not sure I read this. Did I read this? DVDV says, "Can we please just start over, USA? Failed country." I think I did read this. More on Christmas. Veteran says, "Do you think Jew people go after interracial marriage?" Yes. There's no end. There's no. I mean, they're going after gay marriage. So then once that's done, what's next? Like, they're not going to stop. They will continue. So look, I know Thomas has a white wife, but like, these people work against their own interests all the time. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was on the table. Now, I don't think that's anywhere, in the near future. But again, if they are successful in doing what is after the overturning of abortion, then I don't know, in my opinion, nothing is off the table. So I don't really know. Like, if you asked me 2 years ago, would the GOP be trying to overturn same-sex marriage? I would think, no, you're crazy. Why would they do that? Considering, like, where society is, culturally, where things are, is that really going to benefit them politically? They don't care. Like, it's not a. They don't care. For them, as long as it's really more about strength. Like, it doesn't matter how much they potentially hurt even their own voters, which they do all the time when it comes to, economic policy. But even apart from that, culturally, I'm sure there are gay conservatives, but they don't care. We're talking about a minority of people, Christian, white nationalist, fundamentalists, a minority of people controlling everything. And they really, it's for them, that's all they care about. So I have a hard time seeing an end to what they're doing. Mark O'Brien says, "So heartbroken by this news." Emo Dragon became a member. Thank you. Thank you, Dragon. Nicole says, "RBG is rolling in her grave. Great work, thanks." Don't get me started. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if she wasn't acting in her own self-interest, would have retired early. Would have got Obama to replace her while he was, in his 8 years. But no. Stayed on, and then we all know how that turned out. And like, so many of them, so many people in power are like that. It's like, it's not about, once they have that power, it's about their ego. It's about how long they can stay in power. It's not about how can I use this position. Even if they, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, apart from how she handled or didn't handle her retirement, isn't a terrible person, obviously. But that's her legacy now, is that she sat there on the court when she should have retired, just assuming that things were going to go good forever. That, oh, Obama's in, no worries now. You can't operate that way. You have to operate with the thought that, and again, I don't think she did it intentionally. Obviously, I think if she knew that Trump was going to be picking her replacement, she would have stepped down earlier. But you can't operate with the assumption that the right isn't going to, take over or have power. You have to operate always knowing that these rights are not always guaranteed. And you have to be always playing offense. Ryan Nowicki says, "How much do you see this increasing turnout in November?" How much do you see this increasing turnout in November? "I hope SCOTUS reform discussions scare the hell out of them and reverse some of this." I actually do think it will increase turnout a little bit. I don't know if it's really going to be enough. But people that may be a little, this is, I think, most voters at this point, a little disappointed with Democrats right now. They may just come out and vote as a defensive mechanism to basically maintain the horrible society that currently exists, as opposed to making it even worse. So I do think it'll help somewhat in terms of turnout, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think they're still going to lose a lot of seats. John Hall says 14 states have laws against sodomy, and over 60% of heterosexuals perform sodomy as defined by law regularly. Many states define marriage as between a man and a woman. Vote Democrats in. Make your rights law. Charles Omar Wood says, hey, David, how can we pressure Biden to not run? Also, how do you counteract libs blaming Bernie or busters for the court decision? Jesus Christ. That's... I'm saying Jesus Christ at those people, not your question. You have two good questions here. But your first one, how can we pressure Biden to not run? We have no power over Biden. There's nothing you can do in terms of Biden. I don't think it, maybe, I don't know. Maybe if there was like a march on Washington just to get rid of Biden by Democratic voters, I don't know, maybe that would do something, but if anything, that would make him stick his heels in even further. So I don't know. Biden has to be pressured by those around him, people that advise him, that are close to him, that he trusts. That's by his wife. Like his wife, that's the only way. His wife has to tell him, I'm going to leave you if you run again. That may be the only thing that would stop him. In terms of how do you counteract libs blaming Bernie or busters for the court decision? Show them how the votes... I've covered this several times now, so I'd have to pull out all the data again. But more Bernie Sanders voters in 2016 voted for Hillary Clinton in the general in 2016 than Hillary Clinton voters in 2008 voted for Obama in 2008. So I forget the exact numbers, but there's data on this. A larger percentage of Bernie voters backed Hillary compared to Hillary voters backing Obama. You're always going to have a percentage of people not show up in an election if their primary candidate didn't win. That's a very normal thing, happens every election cycle. So if you want to compare those, if you really want to compare those, then compare the reality. Like compare those differences. That wasn't the issue. The issue was Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate. Now, maybe it would have helped, a little around the edges if people with platforms on the left didn't act like Trump was no big deal. But even then, you have to, how much power do they really have? It's kind of hard to discern that. The biggest issue of just Hillary was a terrible candidate. She always was. Just because you win a Democratic primary, again, I discussed this earlier, it doesn't mean you're a good general election candidate. To win a primary in a Democratic, or to win a Democratic primary, you have to just appeal to Democratic voters, typically older voters, and those tend to be people that watch MSNBC, CNN, and are taken in by whatever candidate they're pushing. Whereas a general, you need to be able to appeal to typical non-voters, and that's how Democrats win, is higher voter turnout. So you don't do that with a terrible candidate like Hillary Clinton. But you never, like, some of those people you're never going to win over. It's not even worth trying. Like, allow them to, live in their dumbass reality. It doesn't matter. They'll believe what they want to believe regardless of whatever you show them. You can show them data, show them all the facts. So you may sway some of them back to, being rational thinkers. But at this point, if they're still talking about this, if they're still blaming Bernie or busters, then you're very unlikely you're going to, you're not going to change them. The Bruda says GOP will use the Roe win to fundraise because they'll say, look, we get results, give us money. They have no issues fundraising anyways. Like, they'll fundraise regardless. But yeah, I'm sure it's going to help them for that contingent of far right voters for sure, which at this point is, most of them. Cedric Humphrey, thank you for your super chat. Judy McGrath says this is why the right wing wins. They have almost unlimited resources, better at messaging, and always look at the long game in politics. The left needs to start strategizing for future and, if possible, stop all the infighting. You can't. So I agree with you completely, minus the last part. You're not going to stop infighting, because how do you control that? And like, who are you talking about? Like, if you're talking about like online, like Twitter, YouTube comments, I'm not sure how much that really, what percentage of voters that actually represents. But like, that said, Twitter is a real place. Real people exist on the platform that do vote. But in terms of, lawmakers and that infighting, there's always going to be a struggle there, because the issue are the people that have power have the money. So if you want Democrats, ultimately, if you really want to stop the infighting, then the capitalists have to bow down to the base, which is the working class. And they're not going to do that because they have the money. They are the capitalists. Why would they decide to do that when so far you've seen they fight the left way harder than they fight Republicans? So the only way to stop infighting is to stop the Democratic establishment, ultimately. And the only way to do that is to defeat them. You can't just, decide to stop fighting. But everything else you said, I agree completely. Yeah, the right has more resources, better at messaging. They work on a more emotional level, and that tends to sway voters more than, I don't know, like Harvard, Yale speak, which again, Democratic lawmakers have to move away from the professional managerial class and move towards a working class message. I lost my place. There we go. C. DeVries says, we need an American Labor Party. Yeah. I mean, the Democratic Party needs to be the Labor Party. That's the reality. And at one point they were. But that's what needs to happen. The way to do that is to remove leadership, primary leadership out, and take it over. And the way to do that is to have people that are sitting Democrats be unafraid to challenge. In fact, I'm wondering what other Democrats are saying right now, like progressive Democrats. They have to be unwilling to challenge power in their own party. Let's see. Okay, AOC just tweeted this out. Let's see what she says. Overturning Roe and outlawing abortions will never make them go away. It only makes them more dangerous, especially for the poor and marginalized. People will die because of this decision, and we will never stop until abortion rights are restored in the U.S. Okay, this is very much a general statement. All right, I want to see, before I get to your other chats, I just want to see if anybody on the Democratic side is like saying, hey, it's time for some changes here, because we need to actually fight this. Who is a fighter? Who's left? I don't know, like tweets aren't everything, but it does help to sort of inform what you're willing, what you're willing to say publicly helps to inform what you may be willing to do politically. Okay, I'm not seeing it. I don't know. I could spend all day looking up these accounts. I'm not seeing much so far. Let me get to another question. Aquatic Borealis says the way to reduce money and intimidation in politics is to remove the mechanism that magnifies it. It's a structural problem. Going to keep asking to look at the cardboard box reform. I've looked at this before. I've talked about this before. From my understanding and my reading of it, what was it, like 2 years ago, if I am remembering this correctly, it's essentially we don't get to see who votes on what. Is that correct? Like you don't get to see how lawmakers vote, and that's supposed to make them more confident in voting against who funds them. Is that the idea of it? because I don't see that really playing out the way you think it would play out. But I explored that like a couple years ago. Arn says, don't want to get anyone in trouble here, but explain to me how anything short of a... I don't know if I want to read this. I hear what you're saying. I don't think that is really going to solve the problem. The JP says, unreal. Pat back, thank you for your super chat. Justin Kosick says, they struck down concealed carry laws right after the Senate passed a weak gun bill, first in 30 years. Still, they're on a roll. Sad day. Yeah, there was those two more decisions. Yeah, Miranda rights also. You don't have to be read your Miranda rights, or you don't have the right to sue an officer who doesn't read you your rights. Really bizarre shit. Cindy says Michelle Obama posted statement, feel hopeless today. I don't know what Michelle Obama is really going to add to this conversation. Let's see what she said. Just out of curiosity, since the commenter brought it up, I'm heartbroken today. I'm heartbroken for people around this country who just lost the fundamental right to make informed decisions about their own bodies. I am heartbroken that we may not now be destined to learn the painful lessons of a time before Roe was made law of the land, a time when women risked losing their lives getting illegal abortions. Yeah, I should mention. So I barely talked about the actual impact of the decision because I discussed it all when it first came out that this is going to happen. But abortions are still going to happen. They're just going to be unsafe abortions, and they will definitely, for sure, lead to the injury and death of more women. That is a fact. So this idea of trying to limit this, it's just going to impact people who don't have access to proper health care, who don't have the money to go across state lines or go to a different country. Anyways, at a time when women risk their lives getting illegal abortions, a time when government denied women control over their reproductive functions, forced them to move forward with pregnancies they didn't want, and then abandoned them once their babies were born. Yeah. Also, another point that, of course, is worth making. The GOP doesn't care about babies, obviously. This is about control. Because if they cared, then they would do a hell of a lot more to ensure that kids weren't going hungry. That is what our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers lived through, and now here we are again. So yes, I am heartbroken for the teenage girl full of zest and promise who won't be able to finish school or live the life she wants because her state controls her reproductive decisions. For the mother of a non-viable pregnancy who is now forced to bring that pregnancy to term. For the parents watching their child's future evaporate before their eyes. For the healthcare workers who can no longer help them without risking jail time. When we don't understand our history, we are doomed to repeat its mistakes. In this country, our futures are tied together in a delicate tapestry that we each have a hand in making. Too often, cynicism or indifference makes us feel like we don't have a say in weaving it, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The more we allow pessimism to push us further into helplessness, the less we will be empowered to help create the kind of country we want to live in. This horrifying decision will have devastating consequences, and it must be a wake-up call, especially to the young people who will bear its burden. And I just got to pause there for a second. The young people are the only ones that have been trying to change things for the past 8 years, at least. This should be a wake-up call for those in power that have been denying their attempts to change things. I know this is not the future you chose for your generation, but if you give up now, you will inherit a country that does not resemble you or any of the values you believe in. This moment is difficult, but our story does not end here. It may not feel like we are able to do much right now, but we can and we must. If you're like me and you want to get started right now, I encourage you to channel your frustration and anger into action by getting involved. Organizations like Planned Parenthood and the United States of Women, among many others, have resources you can look to if you want to help others or if you need help yourself. Our hearts may be broken today, but tomorrow we've got to get up and find the courage to keep working towards creating the more just America we all deserve. We have so much left to push for, to rally for, to speak for, and I know we can do this together. So those resources there if you need them. Largely, a good message here. I think it's important not to get too pessimistic, even though, let's be clear, it's very hard to remain optimistic in times like this. But what choice do you have? Like, if you're still engaged in this stuff, and I'm glad you are, because it's really easy just to tune out and just be like, everything's fucked, why even bother? If you're still engaged in this, then even if you don't want to acknowledge it, you probably have some hope in you. You know that things can turn around, or you're just a masochist and you just want to absorb all the garbage in the world. But I'm still doing this because there is opportunity here to educate others, to inform people. That's why I still do this. Otherwise, why would I do this? So I get her message there in terms of don't remove yourself from the fight. I'll leave this up for now. Let me get some more chats here. Nathan Strebel says, does this end bodily autonomy as a concept? Kind of, considering what Thomas is looking to do. So, like, I'm not sure how it applies legally, but it appears to apply to a few other cases here. Sandra says, thanks for all you do, and I appreciate the passion behind your takes. Thank you, Sandra. Robbie says, Obama today is pathetic, quote unquote, the fight will go on. Firefly says, hey there, friend. Miranda writes, left here, been a long time. As much as this has broken me, I wouldn't have wanted to hear it from anyone else. Thank you for being here for us. Much love. Thank you, Firefly. MR says, thank you for your work. Like the video, guys. Thank you. Space says, Biden stepped down August 2023. Corporate Dems shoehorn Kamala. Oh, of course. Their fight's not going to go away. Like, at no point are they just going to be like, okay, you guys take over now. Clearly, we are terrible at this. No, they're going to keep doing it because they're, like, in their minds, they're successful either way. Because they're the ones with the money. They're the ones controlling things. So in their minds, even them losing, as long as they're in power in the opposition, they're fine. Turbo says it's sickening that this is all Trump's doing and he could care less about the decision. Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah. That guy, says, but Hillary was just as bad. I think you're saying that sarcastically. Yeah, obviously she was not as bad as this. First thing Pelosi says was, quote, this is from Paul, says we cannot allow the Republicans to take the majority. But look, lawmakers, they're the ones that really need to shut the fuck up when it comes to voting. Like, earlier I discussed what Democrats should do in terms of their strategy, which they will not do. But if you're in power right now, if you're in leadership right now, telling people to vote harder when you are running Congress, it's just so stupid. It's so tone deaf. It's moronic. Why are people going to support you when you're in power while this is happening? While you were not even willing to discuss what else you could be doing, like expanding the court not even discussing it. So it's very. What do you expect from Pelosi though? Like, that's obviously she's not going to say anything that is going to resonate in any real way. Queen says that asteroid is not moving fast enough. Thank you for your chat. Carmel Kisses says, will America live in hands-made tale? Life imitates art. The pandemic happened so. ... Lloyd Tockwell says, SCOTUS just gave Democrats a reason to vote. This is... I hear you, Lloyd. There definitely appears to be a bit of a generational divide from what I'm seeing on this idea that this may help Democratic numbers. Sure, it may for some people, but considering Democrats are in power while this is happening, it may also suppress voters. There has to be... Democrats have to show the ability to accomplish something while in power. Why are people going to feel encouraged to come out and vote for a party that says they will do things they don't do, or even discuss doing? As I mentioned, the public option has not even been mentioned once by Biden since he became president. Like, taking cannabis out of a Schedule I drug, he can do through executive order. He said he would decriminalize cannabis use. Has not done that. He said he would cancel student debt. He has the power to do that as well through his executive powers. Is not doing that. Why are people going to feel encouraged to vote for a party where they say they will do things and in some cases actually have the power to do, despite Congress? Biden has the power to do a lot more. Check out David Dayen's piece on Biden and his executive powers. I think it's in the American Prospect. Regardless, look up David Dayen. Joe Biden has fantastic pieces discussing what Biden can do. But like, don't expect this is going to help Democrats. It may, for some people, make them come out to vote as a defense mechanism because they don't want things to get even worse. But this is happening now while they're in power. So basically I'm saying don't let Democrats just sit back on their ass and do nothing. Like, ensure that you are still pushing your representatives to try and accomplish something while they have power, because they will have no power after the midterms. How do I still have a cold? It's been like, I think it's been 4 weeks, so I may have an infection at this point. It's a little ridiculous. Jesus. Once you have a kid, your kid gets you sick. I wish someone told me that. This is like, I've never had a cold in the summer, and now I have a cold in the summer. Where was I? Prairie Fire says, this decision will go down in history the same as the Dred Scott decision. A massive setback, to be sure, but one that will inspire a lot of good trouble. John Brown is still in our hearts. Look, let's see. Because people said, Trump winning, that was going to change things. Everything will change now that Trump's won. Democrats will never go back to the old ways. And then they bring Joe Biden. So, yes, yes, activists, of course, are always going to be on the ground, and those movements are always growing for sure. And it's good to be optimistic and have hope, definitely. But also, don't just assume things. I think that's also a problem, because oftentimes I think we can overassume the power that at least currently movements have, and underestimate the power that those already in power with money have. Because if you're in power already and you have money on your side, that is massive, and that is incredibly tough to defeat. So just understand the opponent you're up against. That isn't to say, I'm not saying give up and don't do it. I'm saying, like, understand what you are fighting, who you are fighting. Because this is not just like a battle of ideas. It's a battle of power. And in the current system, money means a lot when it comes to attaining power. Jackin or Shakan says, thank you for all of your hard work. Keep it up. Thank you. Shane says, with so many distracted from distraction by distraction, so many distracted from distraction by distractions, it's been rough realizing how many people might need more time to regain a sense for engaging in politics with a spirited authenticity. Yes. Yes, I hear you. It's very easy to disengage in times like this, or before this. But it's also, it can also help to engage people. But I don't know what I'm saying. Raymond, thank you for becoming a member. Amba says, remember, kids, Obama also ran on codifying Roe v. Wade and then backed off on that when he had the legislative majority. Yeah, another great point, and I mentioned this in a previous video as well. This is why you can never. I don't know who I'm talking to here, because Democratic leadership is not watching the Rational National, but like, they had power, a lot of power under Obama. They have power now, and they don't use it like that. Republicans will do everything they can with their power that is legal or not legal. They don't care. They will do everything. Democrats don't even use what is in their legal, ability to act, like expanding the court. Why not try? But it's just this is what gets people disengaged from electoral politics. So again, as I said earlier, this is not all about, like, the answer is not vote more. That isn't the answer. Yes, you should vote, of course. That should be a given. But that isn't the answer to these problems. There has to be a groundswell of organized support and their power over lawmakers, and apart from that, ways to help people who are struggling now, and organizations that do exist that address some of those issues. Like, I heard of one example. I'm not sure what this group is called, but a group planning to offer safe abortions in, like, on a boat, I think is the idea. So it, like, they basically go out to sea and then do it legally there. And they help to fund that and pay for those abortions. So, like, groups that do things like that, those are the ones that, in the meantime, are going to keep people going, keep society functioning, while there's an attempt to grow power from the working class. Like and Rock Game says, the problem is we have unmovable Democrats in the Senate. We need to make the case to expand the majority to at least 52. As I said, that's part of the equation. That isn't the and to do that, as I said, people in power have to actually do something with the power they have, because why would someone feel inclined to go out and vote more if they're seeing the results now, which is, what, a single check a year and a half ago? Firefly says, also, this will criminalize miscarriages, force pregnant people to carry dead babies, risking their own life, plus untold other ways this will kill/jail us. This is beyond terrifying. Yeah, it really is. And in case you want more details on that, of course you can look that up, but I think I covered this in several videos when this news first broke, like a month or so ago. Justin says, also, Biden keeps saying he doesn't want to be like Trump whenever he's asked why he doesn't sign more executive orders. Weak excuses and embarrassment. 100%. Biden may be the weakest, the weakest president of, like, the last 50, 60 years, if not longer. Just an incredibly actually probably longer. An incredibly weak an embarrassment of a Democratic president. Marissa Clardy says the hopelessness you feel when you do vote, and yet the hopelessness you feel when you do vote, and yet still your rights to exist are being stripped away. As a trans person, I'm terrified and hopeless. Yeah, I hear that. That's another aspect that is the right has turned into this culture war issue, and it's just trans rights are just an issue of human rights. That's it. It's a human rights issue. It isn't a culture war issue. And they're using it the same way they used gay marriage when, in the run up to George Bush. The Bushido Way of Gaming says it's time to start placing bans using religion and drafting laws based on it. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. But thank you for your super chat. Farmer says, why pass legislation to codify a right when you can fundraise off the fear? The ERA might have given reasoning to secure all the rights now at risk. Yeah, I think that was part of their, that had to be a part of their decision. I mean, part of the decision, of course, was Democratic voters, when Obama was in power and could have codified this. The fear of turning off, I guess, Christian Democrats. I guess that was, part of the political fear, but also part of the calculation had to be that, hey, we can fundraise off this. In their minds, thinking, oh, the right's never going to take this away. It's always going to be there. So, but we can use the fear of them taking it away as a way to fundraise and a way to, garner votes, as opposed to maybe thinking, hey, maybe we can get more voters over if we show them that we can actually accomplish things while we are in power. But it's always been the Democratic strategy in terms of who has power now and has had power for decades, has always been to do as little as possible and use the fear of rights being stripped away as a way to generate support and money. And you can see how that has, I guess, paid off for them. They're in power still, but not paid off for anybody else. Law Gnome says, how much of these new rulings make it easier to selectively convict people for felonies, thereby removing their right to vote? That's a good point. I don't know. Because, if it turns anybody into a potential criminal, if you just helped somebody access a safe abortion, you can really start throwing people in jail over being just good humans. Senor Varga Laga says, had we been focusing on getting economic power, this probably would not have happened. How can we have power when economically we are broken? I guess I'm curious who you mean by we. But if you mean, those at the bottom that don't have power, don't have means, I don't know. All these issues matter. Toby says, if Biden woke up today, slammed a fresh vial of adrenochrome, and immediately started pressuring cinema and Manchin FDR style, do we have time to end filibuster and codify Roe before midterm? I would think so. I mean, they have the power to do something. Expand the court at the very least. But yes. Biden and Democrats absolutely have the power to do something if they were to eliminate the filibuster, at least have a carve out for it on some of these issues. And because Biden is unwilling to apply any pressure at all, and looks, even pressure, there's no guarantee any pressure would even be successful. But you can try. You can at least try. And he has not even tried to apply any pressure at all. And I guess the fear is, oh, what if Manchin then becomes a Republican? Okay, what's the difference? He basically is. Like, I mean, and then maybe in doing that, maybe you pick up a couple more Senate seats and you don't need Manchin. So it's, if you don't fight at all, I don't see how not fighting is a successful strategy. As we've seen, it has not been a successful strategy. TKE says, why does fear work so well with rallying Republican voters but not Democratic voters? That's a good question. I think it depends on the fear, and if it's if it's rational fear, and also what people are motivated by. Like, there definitely is a conservative voters are a lot easier to kind of funnel into a single idea, a single push, a single candidate, whereas Democratic voters are always, it's this push and pull between this sort of upper class, more in not all cases, but most cases, you know, older generation voters that are diehard Democratic voters, and a younger base that isn't always a guaranteed vote. Which is why, strategically, just looking at this, if you just want to win as a Democrat, and I understand, like, you can't put this aside, but for this argument's sake, put aside the impact that money has on Democrats here, because that ultimately is the reason why things are the way they are. But just putting that aside, just looking at this strategically as a Democratic lawmaker or as leadership, if you want to win, you understand you're going to have these people that vote for you regardless. Regardless of the candidate, they will vote for, blue no matter who. There are those voters that exist. They typically are people that largely vote in Democratic primaries, that always vote in those primaries, that identify as a Democrat. They have this attachment to the party for whatever reason. I don't have attachments to any party, but they have an attachment to Democratic Party. They will vote regardless. So you don't really need to appeal to those people at all, because they're going to vote regardless. You have to appeal to the people that don't normally vote, the people that do not feel attached to any party. And the way you do that is by speaking to their issues, which often are issues of both working class economic issues and issues of human rights when it comes to, for example, the trans community, abortion rights. So you have to speak to that, and not just speak to it. You have to accomplish legislation. There has to be a difference made in their lives where they feel something is done. Otherwise, why would they vote for you the next time if you keep telling them that this is going to happen, that we're going to do something, and that never comes? So it's never smart to blame the voter. You have to look at where's the easiest place to apply pressure, and that's on people in power. There's less of them, as opposed to trying to apply pressure to millions of non-voters. How do you apply pressure to millions of non-voters? It's just, this is why the idea of blaming the voters is always so stupid. You can't control non-voters. You can control the people at the top running these candidates. That's what you can control, or try to control, or try to have a pressure point there. So that's where the pressure should be applied. And I forget my point now. But ultimately, because of that push and pull in the party with those voters, it's hard to have all your voters vote based on one idea or a fear of something, because that isn't how they operate. There's different segments within the Democratic Party that vote for different reasons. And you have to be able to speak to those issues while really not caring at all about those at the top that are going to vote regardless. So, and yet Democrats have always cared about those at the top, or ultimately not even really cared about them, but they have been owned by them, are them. They are the people at the top. So That's who they care about. They care about their own self-interest. They care about their own money. They care about their own seat. But clearly, that isn't a winning strategy if you care about actually winning. And that's even separate from, what the right thing to do is in terms of policy and how to actually help people. Losing my voice. This is fantastic. Okay. I'll stay on a bit longer, talk about this a bit more, and then get off as my voice disintegrates. I just want to see if I can find some more quotes, maybe, from this decision, or some more reporting, something worth mentioning. All right, The Guardian. I tend to enjoy The Guardian. Not always, but usually. It's from Maura Donegan. The story is about Democratic politicians whose leadership on abortion rights. Let me zoom in here. The story is not about the Democratic politicians. Not about. Whose leadership on abortion rights has been tepid at best and negligent at worst since the 1990s. In the coming days, people who have voted to uphold the Hyde Amendment, a provision that has banned federal funding of abortion since the 1976. Where am I? Effectively limiting the constitutional right to an abortion to only those Americans wealthy enough to afford one, will tell us how terrible this is. They will issue statements talking about their outrage. They will make platitude-filled speeches about the worth of dignity of American women. They will not mention their own inaction, persisting for decades in the face of mounting. This is a great point. They will not mention their own inaction, persisting for decades in the face of mounting and well-funded right-wing threats to Roe. They will not mention that they did nothing as all that worth and dignity of American women hung in the balance. They will not mention that most of them still, even now, oppose doing the only thing that could possibly restore reproductive freedom, expanding the courts, as I've been mentioning. But the cowardice, hypocrisy, and historic moral failure of national Democrats is not the story. And certainly the story is nothing so vulgar as what this withdrawal of human rights might mean for that party's midterm election prospects. She keeps mentioning what the story is not. What is the story? What is the story? I mean, this is informing. This so far is a great piece, though. Like, it's telling you what's going to happen and what has happened to lead to this. The legal chaos that will now follow. The fact that 13 states today, today's order has made all abortion immediately illegal. The consummation of sexist ambitions that had long been enshrined in so-called trigger laws, provisions that have been on the books for years and decades to ban abortion upon the court's reversal of Roe, misogyny lying in wait. Nor is the story about the other 13 states that will almost certainly ban abortion now too, meaning that the procedure will be illegal in 26 of the nation's 50 states within weeks. Not about legislatures? Okay. The cop who will charge the first doctor or the first patient with murder. That's already happening anyway. The story is not about the anti-choice activists sneering in their triumph who will say that they only want the best for women and that women can't be trusted to know what's best for themselves. The story is not about women who will be imprisoned or committed at the behest of these activists or the desperate pregnant people with nowhere to turn who will be ensnared by them into deceitful crisis pregnancy centers or exploitative maternity ranches. Oh man, I just want to get to what the story is. Okay, the media. Yes, we know the media will do its thing. Here we go. The real story is the women. The real story is the student whose appointment is scheduled for tomorrow, who will get a call from the clinic sometime in the next hours telling her that no, they are sorry they cannot give her an abortion after all. The real story is the woman waiting tables who feels so sick and exhausted these past few weeks that she can barely make it through her shifts, who will soon be calling clinics in other states, hearing that they're all booked for weeks, and will be asking friends for money to help cover the gas, or the plane, or the time off that she can't afford. The real story is the abortion provider, already exhausted and heartbroken from years of politicians playing politics, with her patients' rights, who will wonder whether she can keep her clinic open for its other services anymore, and conclude that she can't. The real story is the mom of two, squinting at her phone as she tries to comfort a screaming toddler, trying to figure out what she will have to give up in order to keep living the life she wants with the family she already has. The real story is about thousands of these women, not just now, but for decades to come. The women whose lives will be made smaller and less dignified by unplanned and unchosen pregnancies. The women whose health will be endangered by the long and grueling physical process of pregnancy. The women and others who will have to forego dreams, end educations, curtail careers, stretch their finances beyond the breaking point, and subvert their own wills to someone else's. The real story is the counterfactuals, the books that will go unwritten, the trips untaken, the hopes not pursued, and jokes not told, and the friends not met, because the people who could have lived the full, expansive, diverse lives that abortions would allow will instead be forced to live other lives, lives that are lesser precisely because they are not chosen. The real story is the millions of women and others who now know that they are less free than men are, less free in the functioning of their own bodies, less free in the paths of their own lives, less free in the formation of their own families. The real story is not this order. The real story is these people's unfreedom, the pain it will inflict and joy it will steal. The real story is women, and the real story is the impossible question: how can we ever grieve enough for them? God damn. This is a really good piece. Again, credit here to Moira Donegan. Check it out in The Guardian if you want to read it all. Excuse me. Fumayer says we need not just freedom of religion, but also freedom from religion. Amend the Constitution to protect us from political parties pushing their religious beliefs into law. Caramel Kisses says this is modern day slavery that restricts a woman's liberties. They are saying no abortions and also will be saying people can't take morning after pills. This is essentially a form of control. Yep. They suck fat, long, grass-filled donkey logs. Oh my God, what a name. Says, because we are not fearful people. I assume that's in response to why don't Democratic voters vote based on fear like Republicans do. That is true, yes. That's a shorter way of saying what I was saying. That there's a lot more different contingents at play, I think, in the Democratic Party. I'm sure some do vote based on fear. I bet you a lot of people that voted for Biden in 2020 didn't vote for him because they liked Biden, but because they did not want Trump, the former years of Trump. So like it changes depending on the circumstances for sure. But I do think you are correct generally that Democratic voters see what is possible. They have a little more hope, a little more optimism in terms of what can be done to benefit society. That isn't to say all of them act. I just finished saying. There's different contingents, different groups there of voters. Of course, not all Democratic voters vote like that, but it's just. I think the other answer is just, as I said, just more of a mix of people, as opposed to conservative voters. Now that bodily autonomy no longer matters, I got dibs on MTG's liver. I'm sure it could be used to save someone worth saving. Mark O'Brien says, hey, David, do you have any words of hope you can offer to us, as many of us are quite disillusioned by this news? Man, you put me on the spot here. Jesus. Words of hope. Well, as I said earlier, you have to keep fighting. Just in terms of, otherwise, as I said, if you're here watching this, if you're still engaged in the news, then you still, even if you don't know it or don't want to admit it, there's still an element of you that knows that things can change, can be improved, that society doesn't have to be, just completely terrible all the time. Things can change. things have changed. You have to look in the, like, I don't know, go read some history in terms of how things looked. It seemed like the end of the world uh, during, the first two world wars, and just people seeing that the odds were against them, and that there was no hope, that nothing was going to change, that things were just getting worse, and people in power had just this insatiable need for greed and control, and yet they were defeated, and things did turn around, can turn around. Now, obviously not for everybody. Obviously, at no point in history was the world perfect and everything was in harmony. But that's life, right? Like, that's being a human. Is there's things change. There's a push and pull. And at the very least, this may be a lesson for some, that, especially those in power, maybe, that you can't just assume when you have a right that that's it, that you have that and it's there forever. No, this is now a lesson that these rights are always on the line, and you always have to be willing, as somebody that cares about human rights, cares about others, you always have to be willing, with the power that you have, to do what you can to ensure those powers are not stripped away, to make it as hard as possible to strip those powers away. Meaning, for example, codifying Roe into law, which Obama could have done. But going into the future, people that do have good intentions can be pressured and look back at this time when these rights were stripped away, and understand that you have to use your power. If you're someone that does want to improve society, then when you are in power, use that power for good. Now, yes, there are so many caveats and everything there in terms of how do you get that power, because a lot of power is simply given based on who you're serving. But again, these are all struggles. These are all fights. And the world has been through, similar fights before, and we've gotten through it. And like, it really depends what you're motivated by, right? Like, some people are motivated by seeing, or I should say, by fear. Some people are motivated by fear. They see something like this, and this motivates them to do something. Others are, disillusioned by moments like this, and it's harder for them to act when they see society getting worse. So it all depends how you're motivated. So for those that are already motivated by something like this and understand the need to fight harder, I don't have anything to really offer them. I mean, they do what they got to do. Keep fighting. But those that are taken down by this and feel deflated and see no hope, again, you have to look back and understand that, yes, things are terrible. Recognize that things are terrible, and things have gotten worse and can get worse. But what is the alternative? You're on this planet. Ensure that you can live the best life that you can live, while also understanding that things can change, and there are ways for you to get involved if you have the ability to, within activist groups, within labor movements, to feel like you have some impact. And even like locally, like, it's really easy to sort of, push off the importance of local politics or local movements, but they play a very important part in sort of this foundation of activism, and also the foundation of what's possible nationally. You fill the, like, when it comes to whether it's a school district, you want to like a, what's it called? I'm forgetting the terminology now. But there are various positions you can take, roles you can take within your own local politics. Do that. If you feel that, if you can, and there are people around you that can help you do that, or you know somebody who would be a very effective person in a position of power like that on a local level, do that. That's how you build that power. That's how the right built out their power. They start on the ground level, and this didn't happen overnight. This was a decades-long process of their investment in this project, and it's paying off now. So, yes, the left lacks that sort of that unified power, largely because I mean the actual left, not like Democrats, largely because of money reasons. Not many billionaires want to fund, anti-capitalists, but that's why these groups exist, right? Places like, groups like DSA, in terms of politics, but also just in terms of, labor organizing. These groups exist to give the working class power. So if you feel like you need some hope, then become a member, like become a part of that, or a part of a group that is doing work like that on a more local level, that you feel you have more of a hand in, more control over. And that will, I think that in itself will generate some hope within you, because you can see, when you see things change on a local level, you understand you have power. It's very hard as an individual to feel like you have any power over national politics, over, the Supreme Court. But if you feel like you can have power locally, then that's how you start. Ryan Nowicki says, this is from the same SCOTUS member who said you can't introduce new exonerating evidence in a death sentence if your lawyer failed to represent you. Yeah, they also did that, where you can't, if your lawyer failed to represent you properly, you can't use that as a reason to re-examine your case, which is pretty messed up. Eric Torres, thank you. Law Gnome says there's a lawsuit based on aspects of the Jewish faith going through claiming access to an abortion, pro-choice, is a religious right. Interesting. Okay. Be curious to see how that goes through. Eric Torres says, I think we need to collectively sit with our grief in light of losing Roe. We can't simply shrug it off and move on. We need to internalize the gravity of the situation and be moved to action. Eric, I agree with you for those that are moved by that, because I'm telling you, I'm somebody who, when I internalize horrible shit, I want to sit in my room and, rock back and forth. Like, I don't want, that doesn't motivate me. Cause for me, I operate on that level. I operate already, on a level of internalizing all this garbage every single day. So for me to further internalize the worst shit in the world, it does not motivate me. Now, it may motivate you and others like you, but understand different people are motivated for different reasons. So, at the same, I'm also not saying shrug it off. Obviously, you can't just shrug. This is a major decision. You can't just shrug this off. But to simply internalize it doesn't necessarily move somebody to action, though it does for some, as I said, but not for everybody. Kata Chai says, hey, David, thanks for what you do. I looked into ballot initiatives, but it looks like it takes a lot of capital, which I don't have. Thoughts? Yes, it's a problem. Major problem. But that said, when a ballot initiative arises, one that you care about, then make sure you support it. But in terms of like you as an individual starting one, you're going to have there's going to be some walls you run into, which is why individuals can't really change things, but groups of people organizing can. David Sull says, I blame Third Way, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama Democrats for allowing the soulless GOP investment being able to happen in the first place. Yeah. I mean, That investment happened even before Clinton. But no, yes, I agree. And it isn't as much about allowing it to happen as it's not having a counter to their investment. There was no counter to that, and you see the results. I mean, Republicans, they don't win. They don't get the popular vote, neither with the president, with the Senate. I mean, millions upon millions of more voters in America are not in support of this. You see it in polling, you see it in election results, you see it in how disillusioned people are with the whole process. They wouldn't be disillusioned if they were happy with what's going on. So you have, a lot of people who don't vote because they see the failure of the party that is supposed to be there fighting for them. And then you have people who, I don't know, are just disengaged. All right, what else? What else can I add to this conversation before maybe getting out of here? Foggy, thank you for your support. Where's my tab? I said this earlier, but it really is just bizarre how this medical procedure, it's just a medical procedure. That's all abortion is. It's a medical procedure. It's not anything else. How this has been turned into this massive issue. This massive cultural issue. And it was invented. Like, this issue was invented as an issue about 40 years ago or 50 years ago. There was never there were Catholics who were perfectly fine with abortion. It was not like they had no issue with this, and it was turned into a culture war issue to the point where this is, just clearly stripping rights away. And you go to other countries, as I said earlier, other countries, other cultures. Abortion is just a medical procedure. No one thinks of this as like killing children. Like, it's not. It's so ridiculous to think that. Like, this is like ruling, oh, if you broke your leg, you can't get a cast. Like, that's what this is. But worse, because of, if you break your leg, it's going to heal, as opposed to, you having a child that's your entire life. But in terms of like just the procedure itself, it's like outlawing just a basic medical procedure. Like, next they'll say pacemakers are outlawed. Can't have a pacemaker put in because it's changing the will of God. God made you this way. God gave you a bum heart. Then you should die. Like, is that really that far-fetched compared to what they're doing here? It's the same line of thinking. Like, you have cancer, outlaw cancer treatment because God gave you cancer, so you should have cancer. It's what's different? How is that different? It's so bizarre that this has become an issue. Let's see if CNBC adds anything here in terms of some information. So again, this will affect likely 26 states that are, I think I read 13 of them will likely outlaw completely, and then 13 others restricted or completely outlawed as well. All right, I'm looking for quotes here. So earlier, I read this quote, but maybe you came late. Alito wrote, quote, "The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, including the one which the defenders of Roe and Casey now chiefly rely, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment." So much is not mentioned in the Constitution, like having 9 Supreme Court justices, not mentioned in the Constitution. So really weird. Again, it's about control. They'll justify it however they like. Their justifications make no sense. That provision has been held to guarantee some rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution, but any such right must be deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. In their scathing joint dissent, the court's liberal justices wrote, "The majority has overruled Roe and Casey for one and only one reason, because it has always despised them, and now it has the votes to discard them. The majority thereby substitutes a rule by judges for the rule of law. The majority would allow states to ban abortion from conception onward because it does not think forced childbirth at all implicates a woman's right to equality and freedom." Great quote here. Dissent by Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan. So, yeah, this is, and by the way, this is how we should be discussing it. This is forced childbirth. That's what this is. And that clearly impacts women's rights to equality and freedom. Today's court, that is, does not think there is anything of constitutional significance attached to a woman's control of her body and the path of her life, it said. The state can force her to bring pregnancy to term even at the steepest personal and familial costs. Yeah, and this came, of course, day after the court invalidated a century-old New York law that had made it very difficult for people to obtain a license to carry a gun outside of their homes. All right. All right, that's just more about the leak. Okay. Let me grab some more chats here, and then maybe I'm going to get out of here because I can barely breathe. To like blow my nose, to cough. I need to eat something. Jesus. This cold is ridiculous. I've never had a cold in the summer, and this is the last 4 weeks, so I'm probably sicker than I realize. All right, I'm going to blow my nose. Muting. There we go. That's all I had to do. Maybe I should have blown my nose earlier. Okay. Where was I? If you think about it, this is from Andre. If you think about it, Republicans played this well. They dropped this now while the country is dealing with its other issues. No major blood on them. Yeah, I definitely think that was part of the decision to drop it now. And by the way, on a Friday, you know, you drop this on, a Tuesday. You got the whole week of media. On a Friday, it's different the way the media cycle works. Jen, thank you for becoming a member. Elizabeth Smith, with a generous chat, says, I do not understand why no one is talking about the American Anti-Corruption Act. We could solve a lot of these problems if we demanded. Go to represent.us. All right, check out represent.us, the American Anti-Corruption Act. I think maybe the reason why is because it probably has very little chance at passing with the current makeup of Congress. That's my guess. Hontas Farmer says, no reference to cannons, yet no one got artillery. Yeah, like the idea that, the Constitution doesn't say this, that could be applied to so many things. It's just a stupid argument. But again, they don't care. They will use whatever argument works for them, however they feel they can justify it, without it making any sense. Mr. Downtown says, hey, David, with radical policies decisions that have been made this week, can we forecast the Republicans' welfare states will go in more debt because of social services will increase? Yeah, that's what's so amazing about all this. They distract their voters with these issues. They turn into culture wars that are just issues of human rights, as I've discussed. Trans rights, human rights issue. Abortion rights, human rights issue. They turn it into a culture war, and it distracts their voters from the reality of their economic situation. The poorest states are, of course, Republican states. Now, that isn't to say there isn't poverty in Democratic states. Of course there is. A lot of it. And generally, it's all due to neoliberal policies, which is why, again, the real left has had an answer to this for decades, but we don't have the capital, for obvious reasons, to be put into positions of power. It's almost like you have to sort of, if it's possible, I mean, maybe it's too late now because, neolibs stop winning, but at one time, it would have maybe been possible to have an actual left-wing candidate pretend to be a neoliberal, and then once they win, govern as someone on the actual left. But I think we're past that point of that even being a strategic, politically strategic idea. Lawnome says every woman should sue the government for the cost of their surrogacy service. Also, no Air Force mentioned in founding docs. Got to ditch that too. 100%. Ditch the Air Force. It's gone. It's not in the Constitution. Actually, you know who I want to check out right now? Ellie Mistal, who is a legal scholar. This is usually my go-to for Supreme Court decisions. He's a writer for The Nation and someone that, in my opinion, should run for public office. But I think anyone with with political talent should. But let me see. Let's see what he's writing here. Oh, God, we get a Manchin quote. Great. So Manchin said, I trusted Gorsuch and Kavanaugh when they testified under oath that they also believed Roe v. Wade was settled legal precedent. And I am alarmed they chose to reject the stability of the ruling. Or the stability of the ruling has provided for 2 generations of Americans. Oh, just alarmed. Ali Mustal here says the line for the Manchin and Collins crowd will be this crap, which is essentially, quote, I was too stupid to listen to everybody else. It's wild that they want their voters to think that they were this fucking dumb. 100%. They knew. They knew. Manchin knew. Collins knew. They all knew. Of course they knew. But yeah, if their defense is, hey, I'm too fucking stupid, well, then let's use that against them. In campaign ads, in the media should actually bring this up. Like to this point, whoever he was saying this to, if it was a reporter or maybe it was a statement, but a reporter should ask Manchin. So you were too dumb to not see this coming, despite here's who called this, and have like a list of quotes from people in the media or other lawmakers that said this was going to happen, and say you're dumber than all these people. Like just bring that to them, because that's what they are saying. They're saying that they were stupid while everyone else called this. So make sure that they acknowledge that, yes, I'm a fucking moron. Make sure they have to acknowledge that. That's the least in terms of the media. That's the least they should be doing. But good luck seeing that. I'm trying to resist the urge to blame the people who didn't care enough to keep the rage focused on the people who have been actively crusading to reduce women to second-class status for a generation. I'm trying really hard, Ringo. Okay. If women could shoot bullets out of their fallopian tubes, they'd have more rights. Oh my God. Oh my God. Shockingly accurate. Scurry Away says, okay, so here we are now. In the same essence of CRT, we need to learn from our history. Why not Dems get busy and codify gay marriage and trans rights? Get busy, Dems, do something. Agreed. State Fishing says Latin America is standing up and fighting back against neoliberalism. When will the U.S.? Great point. That is also, I should have brought this up earlier when I was asked about hope. Try to impart some hopeful message. Here's a hopeful message. Latin America is going left. They have elected 4 left-wing, actual like socialists in the past like 18 months. I covered the most recent one in Colombia. So you have Colombia, Honduras, Bolivia. I have to go check the list, but several of them. Latin America now, and to my surprise, no American coups being initiated here. So we may begin to see some progress in Latin American countries. Not with the assumption here, unfortunately, my other brain kicks in, with the assumption that, nothing is done to undermine any future elections there from future U.S. government leaders. So, yeah. But as a collective, to see, not just 1 or 2 electing a left-wing president, but several, it is very encouraging. And I think I've covered them all. I believe I've covered each of those elections. But if you missed the one in Colombia, check it out. I posted that on Monday. Elizabeth Smith, thank you for your support. All right, a little more searching through Eli Mistal, then maybe try to find some other stuff, and then maybe get off. It's the first time in American history the Supreme Court has stripped away a constitutional right from millions that it has previously recognized. And, quote, a new and bare majority, as the dissenters put it, has done what no other previous court has done, simply because it can. It's an interesting point. Yeah, things have clearly moved backwards. And this is while, I'm not saying Democrats did this, because they didn't, but this is while Democrats hold power, meaning that they have the power to try and combat this. Expanding the court being, again, an obvious and bare minimum option here. But you're not really seeing any Democratic leader even try to fight this. From the dissent, as of today, this court holds a state can always force a woman to give birth, prohibiting even the earliest abortions. The state can thus transform what, when freely undertaken, is a wonder into what, when forced, may be a nightmare. On this point, so he says, I'm sorry, everybody, just remember that conservatives always promise to do this, and all the people who told you we were hysterical were total liars. I covered this recently. Nancy Pelosi thinks abortion is fading as an issue. It's 2017. And her daughter recently, after this the first leaked, her daughter came out and was trying to blame the left, of course. Oh, the left's fault. This is your mom. You had power. Your mom had power with Obama that could have done something to ensure that this would not happen, and they didn't. The idea of blaming anybody but these people, and of course the GOP that are doing this, is just insane. The left are the only ones that have been warning about this entire time. You did not listen to them. Fading as an issue. The top female Democrat in Congress believes her party needs to include people with more conservative social views to take back the White House and Congress. Yes, because we all know conservative voters, they're going to vote for a Democrat over an actual Republican. Why would they vote for Republican light over the real thing? They don't. This idea of trying to appeal to conservative voters is so stupid when you have 40% of people who don't normally vote. Those people are ripe for taking. Maybe trying to appeal to them. But this instead is what they do, because they don't want to do anything when it comes to, economic issues. They will fake some messaging around some cultural issues or social issues. But ultimately, at least at this point, and not even this point, they just backed Henry Cuellar over Jessica Cisneros in Texas. Henry Cuellar, the last remaining anti-choice Democrat, who, by the way, was also pro-NRA at least up until 2018, and then he kind of went silent. But pro-NRA, definitely anti-choice Democrat, they backed him over Cisneros. He just officially won after the recount this week. And that's, again, it's important to separate Democratic leadership from the members that actually want to change things. So there are people in the party that backed Cisneros over Cuellar, but leadership has access to money, has a lot more say, a lot more power, and Cuellar won by like a handful of votes. Anyways, whatever. That was 2017. Okay. All right. All right. Some last chats. I'll grab some random ones as well. See what y'all are talking about. And then maybe jump off. Dave L says, I sat down and read the 71 Powell memo a while ago. This is what Powell was talking about. It took them 50 years, but they finally did it. Yeah, this has been written about for decades. That this has been their project, their investment. You see the people on the court is picked by the same conservative group. Like they've been working at this forever. Gandalf says criminals calling the shots. Indeed. Thank you for your generous chat as well. Universal says the irony is the GOP hates people. The idea of banning abortion on some moral grounds is rich coming from them. Extremely callous and unempathetic once you're out of the womb. 100%. Very well said. Yeah. And like, people must know that, right? Like, that they really, like, I don't understand how anybody is taken in by the idea that Republicans are the party of family values. They're the ones that care about the kids. How can anyone possibly think that when you see their entire platform, their entire economic platform? They don't give a shit about children, about hungry kids. They don't care. And to be fair, of course, many Democrats don't either. Joe Manchin killed the Build Back Better bill, which would have had the child tax credit, universal pre-K. So there are many Democrats that don't give a shit either. But Republicans have this aura of like, oh, we're family values. We care about the children. And no, you obviously don't. You are completely full of shit. But it just amazes me that I don't know how anyone could actually think that. And ultimately, I don't think they do. I think they understand. People that vote for them understand this is about power. This is about our Christian white nationalism. That's all this is about. And they may not think about it in those terms, but they think about it in the terms of, these are my beliefs that I want to impose on everybody else. And that's how, at least the core of the push for something like this, how the core of those voters, that's how they operate, how they think. Would Jesus approve of Christians caring more for guns than the lives of kids? Of course not, but they don't care. Jesus was a communist. That's very clear from the actual Bible. Now, are there aspects of the Bible that are more about, like fear and hating people? Yes. But in terms of Jesus Christ, the man was a communist. Obviously before, communism, but that's how he operated. It was all about the collective, all about people. There are even aspects of, I covered this recently. I'm really bad at recalling names of things, but there's a group of Christians that I think are still around, but they operate this way. They operate as a commune. Like they understand the actual teachings of Jesus, and that's how they live their lives. So people that actually understand what Jesus lived for and what he did, at least in the Bible, again, we don't know the real Jesus, if he was even a thing. But in terms of how he is written, he lived his life caring for others, putting others before him, caring for the collective, the group, caring for the ones that were disadvantaged, the ones that were down, the ones that needed help. He hated the rich, absolutely hated the rich, and cared for the poor. That is so obvious. It is amazing how they have turned that, how at least a large segment of the religious Christian population, how they have turned that into hating other people, hating groups of other people. It's brainwashing on an incredible degree. Morning Glory says, now there will be so many more kids that God can ignore and turn his back on. Yeah. Someone says that Jesus was a vampire. He rose from the dead, and we drink his blood. I want to read the rest of that. I lost it. Here we go. Daniel says, Jesus was a vampire. He rose from the dead, and we drink his blood for everlasting life. Long live vampire Jesus. Thank you for bringing a little levity to this conversation, Daniel. And you make a good argument. Hard to disagree with that. Mr. Rabbit, excuse me, apologies for my throat, says, what's to stop SCOTUS from copying Gilead Foley? Fire all women from work, freeze their bank accounts and women's names, and nullify all divorces. Blessed be the fruit. These are terrifying times. Yeah, I don't. There's an issue with just having these incredibly powerful 9 people as unelected people, unelected individuals who nobody voted for them to be there. They're just chosen by whoever's in power, chosen there and putting that in the most powerful position you can have above the president. And they're unelected. I don't know what else to say. It's a really stupid system. Someone says snipers on the roof of the Supreme Court. Maybe I can pull up a live shot of what's going on there. Let's see. Let's see what's happening. Okay.
I know so many women are now going to face incredibly difficult situations. I hear you. I support you. I stand with you. The consequences and the consensus of the American people, core principles of equality, liberty, dignity, and the stability of the rule of law demand that Roe should not have been overturned. With this decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country. They've made the United States an outlier among developed nations in the world. But this decision must not be the final word. My administration will use all of its appropriate lawful powers, but Congress must act. And with your vote, you can act. You can have the final word. This is not over. Thank you very much. More to say this in weeks to come. Thank you.
Taking no question.
Again, obviously I caught the end of that, so maybe there's more. Maybe he's saying what he's going to do. But I highly doubt it. It sounded like that was about make sure you vote. Go out and vote. Don't boo, vote. Yeah. Maybe do something as somebody in power. Let's the speech is like 10 minutes. Let's watch it. Maybe y'all missed it.
Just a very solemn moment. Today, the Supreme Court of the United States.
I'm going to speed it up since, it's already played.
Expressly took away a constitutional right from the American people that it had already recognized. They didn't limit it, they simply took it away. That's never been done to a right so important to so many Americans. But they did it. It's a sad day for the court and for the country. 50 years ago, Roe v. Wade was decided and has been the law of the land since then. This landmark case protected women's right to choose, her right to make intensely personal decisions with her doctor, free from the interference of politics. It reaffirmed basic principles of equality, that women have the power to control their own destiny, and it reinforced a fundamental right of privacy, the right of each of us to choose how to live our lives. Now, with Roe gone, let's be very clear. The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk. As chairman and ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, as vice president and now as president of the United States, I've studied this case carefully. I've overseen more Supreme Court confirmations than anyone today, where this case was always discussed. I believe Roe v. Wade was the correct decision as a matter of constitutional law and application of the fundamental right to privacy and liberty in matters of family and personal autonomy. It was a decision on a complex matter that drew a careful balance between a woman's right to choose earlier in her pregnancy and the state's ability to regulate later in her pregnancy. A decision with broad national consensus that most Americans of faith and backgrounds found acceptable, and that had been the law of the land for most of the lifetime.
Yeah, I sped it up. You could tell it's sped up because it's actually more enjoyable to listen to. But yeah, it's at 1.25 speed, so he doesn't talk like this, obviously, on a normal basis.
Of Americans today. And it was a constitutional principle upheld by justices appointed by Democrat and Republican presidents alike. Roe v. Wade was a 7-2 decision, written by a justice appointed by a Republican president, Richard Nixon. In the 5 decades that followed Roe v. Wade, justices appointed by Republican presidents from Eisenhower, Nixon, and Reagan, George W. Bush, were among the justices who voted to uphold the principles set forth in Roe v. Wade. It was 3 justices named by one president, Donald Trump, who were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice and eliminate a fundamental right for women in this country. Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset the balance of our law. It's a realization of an extreme ideology and a tragic error by the Supreme Court, in my view. The court has done what it has never done before, expressly take away a constitutional right that is so fundamental to so many Americans that had already been recognized. The court's decision to do so will have real and immediate consequences. State laws banning abortion are automatically taking effect today, jeopardizing the health of millions of women, some without exceptions. So extreme that women could be punished for protecting their health. So extreme that women and girls were forced to bear their rapist's child, with the child a consequence. It just stuns me. So extreme that doctors will be criminalized for fulfilling their duty to care. Imagine having a young woman have to carry the child of incest as a consequence of incest. No option. Too often the case. The poor women are going to be hit the hardest. It's cruel. In fact, the court laid out state laws criminalizing abortion that go back to the 1800s as rationale. The court literally taking America back 150 years. This is a sad day for the country, in my view. But it doesn't mean the fight's over. Let me be very clear and unambiguous. The only way we can secure a woman's right to choose, the balance that existed, is for Congress to restore the protections of Roe v. Wade as federal law. No executive action from the president can do that. And if Congress, as it appears, lacks the votes to do that now, voters need to make their voices heard.
It lacks the votes because you were unwilling to do anything to attempt to at least try. It doesn't mean it would be successful, but to at least try to eliminate or have a carve out something with the filibuster. And to do that, you need to pressure Manchin and Sinema, I guess, but largely Manchin, at least for this issue. And he's not doing anything in terms of that pressure. So they've had carve outs for other things. I covered this recently. Like, they have filibuster carve outs, important issues. So the whole thing is it's this fake conversation about how, oh, we can't do anything. Actually, you can if you at least tried to do something to fight your own party that has power in Congress. Yes, of course, Republicans are the issue, but you can at least try to do something, and telling people to vote harder. While yes, of course, vote. I'm not saying don't vote. You should vote, but voting is a tool. It's like one of the rare tools that people have. You have actual power as somebody in a position of power as the president with a Congress that is Democratic. Yes, I understand Manchin, but you have power. He has skeletons in his closet. Look at what the Republicans did to Cawthorn. You're telling me Democrats can't do anything at all to Manchin? Really? To at least try? Try to push him in a different direction?
This fall, we must elect more senators and representatives who will codify women's right to choose into federal law once again. Elect more state leaders to protect this right at the local level.
This is embarrassing.
We need to restore the protections of Roe as law of the land. We need to elect officials who will do that. This fall, Roe is on the ballot. Personal freedoms are on the ballot. The right to privacy, liberty, equality, they're all on the ballot. Until then, I will do all in my power to protect a woman's right in states where they will face the consequences of today's decision. While the court's decision cast a dark shadow over a large swath of the land, many states in this country still recognize a woman's right to choose. So, if a woman lives in a state that restricts abortion, the Supreme Court's decision does not prevent her from traveling from her home state to the state that allows it. It does not prevent a doctor in that state from treating her. As the Attorney General has made clear, women must remain free to travel safely to another state to seek care they need. And my administration will defend that bedrock right. If any state or local official, high or low, tries to interfere with a woman's exercising her basic right to travel, I will do everything in my power to fight that deeply un-American attack. My administration will also protect a woman's access to medications.
It's really bizarre, anybody in here defending Joe Biden. Obviously, he's not the one that did this, obviously. But to try and defend him as if he's doing anything, as if he tried to do anything to stop this, to prevent this, to use his power at all, he has incredible power through executive order, incredible executive powers. Read more. Look up David Dayen, Dayen. Look up his piece in the American Prospect. Biden has a lot more power than he is using. That is clear. I'm not saying that he tomorrow could change his decision and turn it back, but he has power that he is not using. To defend him is ridiculous. You have to be willing to compromise. And by the way, this is only a few people. I'm noticing most people are actually, rational and understand Biden is incredibly fucking weak. But to those that don't understand this, why do you think Democrats have a problem turning out voters? Because you have dipshits like this that don't do anything with their power. Democratic leadership is incredibly terrible. Total garbage. Not just because they are bought by corporations, as of course most of Congress is, as the entire Republican Party is. We understand that. They are also terrible because they can't even win on issues like this, that they do at least claim to support. So any defense of them is absurd. I'm not telling you to stay home and never vote. As I discussed before, voting is a tool. When you go and vote, you're not voting for your hopes and dreams and desires. You're voting for it's essentially always a defensive vote, unless you're lucky and get someone like Anina Turner or Bernie Sanders, where you actually get to vote for someone you like. But in most cases, it is a tool that is used as a defense. That's it. It's not, you're not putting all your hopes and dreams into a vote. That isn't what voting is. It's simply a tool. You have to think about it as a tool. But you can't simply look at electoral politics when you are a lawmaker. Like me, as someone with a platform that has maybe, a tiny bit of impact on a few people, I can talk about these issues in a way that talk about voting, because I'm not a lawmaker. I don't have power. But when you are a lawmaker with power, you have power to do something that you can't simply stand by and claim you have no power at all because you don't have Congress. Yes, of course, get more people to vote, whatever, but that isn't your job. Your job as somebody with power, as a lawmaker, as especially the president, is to try to actually do something. You can apply pressure. I've discussed this, all these ideas a million times, whether it's pressuring Manchin, whether it's other powers he has through executive order. He has power that he is not using. That much is obvious. Nobody should be defending Joe Biden. I don't care how long of a Democratic voter you are, how much you identify with this completely useless and weak president. Understand he has power that he is not using. If you can't acknowledge that, that's a problem with you, not with me, not with Joe Biden. He has enough problems. The problem is with you to not recognize that he is incredibly weak and doing absolutely nothing to actually resist this. Anyway, let's finish this ridiculous speech.
That are approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, like contraception, which is essential for preventative health care. Mifepristone, which the FDA approved 20 years ago to safely end early pregnancies and is commonly used to treat miscarriages. Some states are saying that they'll try to ban or severely restrict access to these medications. But extremist governors and state legislators are looking to block the mail or search a person's medicine cabinet or control a woman's actions by tracking data on her apps she uses are wrong and extreme and out of touch with the majority of Americans. The American Medical Association, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists wrote to me and Vice President Harris stressing that these laws are not based on evidence and asking us to act to protect access to care. They say by limiting access to these medicines, maternal mortality will climb in America. That's what they say. Today, I'm directing the Department of Health and Human Services to take steps to ensure these critical medications are available to the fullest extent possible. And the politicians cannot interfere in the decisions that should be made between a woman and her doctor. And my administration will remain vigilant as the implications of this decision play out. I've warned about how this decision risks the broader right to privacy for everyone. That's because Roe recognized the fundamental right to privacy that has served as a basis for so many more rights that we've come to take for granted, that are ingrained in the fabric of this country. The right to make the best decisions for your health. The right to use birth control, a married couple in the privacy of their bedroom, for God's sake. The right to marry the person you love. Now, Justice Thomas said as much today. He explicitly called to reconsider the right of marriage equality, the right of couples to make their choices on contraception. This is extreme and dangerous path the court is now taking us on. Let me close with 2 points. First, I call on everyone, no matter how deeply they care about this decision, to keep all protests peaceful. Peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. No intimidation. Violence is never acceptable. Threats and intimidation are not speech. We must stand against violence in any form, regardless of your rationale. Second, I know so many of us are frustrated and disillusioned that the court has taken something away that's so fundamental. I know so many women are now going to face incredibly difficult situations. I hear you. I support you. I stand with you. The consequences and the consensus of the American people, core principles of equality, liberty, dignity, and the stability of the rule of law demand that Roe should not have been overturned. With this decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country. They've made the United States an outlier among developed nations in the world. But this decision must not be the final word. My administration will use all of its appropriate lawful powers, but Congress must act. And with your vote, you can act. You can have the final word. This is not over. Thank you very much. I have more to say this in weeks to come. Thank you.
Okay. That was a good speech for someone who's not the president. When you have the president and you have power to, for your recommendations to be to vote harder is beyond ridiculous. You should be discussing what you are doing to attempt to stop this or to attempt to codify Roe. Maybe start attacking people in your own fucking party who aren't actually willing to do what is necessary with procedure to pass anything. Like, how many times has Manchin sunk, Biden's agenda? If Biden actually cared, he would do something about that. As I said earlier, look what the GOP to Madison Cawthorn. You can do so much with Manchin. He has ties to the coal industry. His daughter is part of the EpiPen scandal. Like, there are so many pressure points on Manchin that he's unwilling to use. That just an incredibly weak ass president. Total, completely useless. Reasoner Hercules says, I love how even Iran and Saudi Arabia allow abortion, while now it's illegal in half the country. Comedy gold. Colin Underwood says, worthless, absolutely worthless. Yeah. And yes, that speech was on 1.25 speed, because you've never in your life heard Biden speak like that. So yeah, it was sped up a bit because it was a 10-minute speech, and I was not going to sit there for 10 minutes listening to a 10-minute speech. This name gets me every time. They suck fat, long, grass-filled donkey logs. That's the YouTube name. Says, so sick of them saying to vote. We did that. We voted for you. Now do something. It's clear they let it happen just so they can use it for elections. I'm not willing to go that far simply because this is how they've always operated in terms of just... Democrats have never been willing to go after their own. And that's what needs to be done. But I think it's a fair argument to say clearly that, I don't know. The issue is, I think they care more about decorum than they do about human rights. That's the reality. And of course, the GOP care more about power than anything else. They just care about controlling your life. And when you have an opposition like Democrats, that, again, as I said earlier, it's funny to call them the opposition when they're in the position of power. But who's running the show? It's not Democrats. So to have such a weak opposition in the Democratic Party, this is what happens. And again, this is an issue of Democratic leadership, not the entire party. Not like, people get so black and white about these criticisms. Like, yes, I'm criticizing Biden. It doesn't mean I'm telling you to vote for Donald Trump. Like, you have to be able to look at these criticisms on their own and understand that without any pressure on them to change, they're never going to change. And to be fair, they're not going to change, which is why you have to get them out, which is why you got to stop. When it comes to voting, which isn't the end all be all, but when it comes to voting, primaries are the most important. And in primaries, you have to ensure, I get that you hate the party, ensure you are registered to vote for a primary in your state, if you have to do that, as some states are closed states. That is where the actual decisions are made, in the primary. Because once you get to the general, you're stuck with what you got. But you can have a better choice in the primary. All right. Stoop Solo says superconductors exhibit more resistance than the Democrats. With the Third Reich on their doorstep, they went full Neville Chamberlain. Just a weak ass party. Has anybody, what are Democratic lawmakers saying that are not ones that aren't in leadership? I'm curious if there's anyone that is saying that is discussing what they should do, as opposed to just being just putting this on the GOP, which is really which is of course deserves to be done. Of course, they're the problem. Yes, we all understand that. Again, for the people that have a real issue with understanding how criticism works. Yes, we understand Democrats didn't do this, but they let this happen. That is true. Eli Mistal here is saying that Joe Biden's speech was equivalent of thoughts and prayers. Yep. By the way, I'm not the smart guy. I just know who to follow. I just know who to read, who to listen to. Ellie Mistal, or is it Ellie? Eli? No, Ellie. Ellie. Ellie Mistal, David Dan. Those are two examples of people that I often read and look to. Like that's my role here. I'm a curator. I'm just good at knowing who to curate. I'm like I run like an art exhibit, but it's not an art exhibit. It's a YouTube channel, and I'm finding the best content from from all the artists out in the world, or in this case, the intellectuals, or people who aren't intellectual, but just are intellectuals and aren't, well educated, but just know their shit and know how power works, know what needs to be done. That's what I do, and I try to spread out that message. Try to educate others with the message from the people that know what the hell's going on. I do not have a word for how I feel about people who told me I was hysterical for anticipating the court's full-on attack on liberal democracy, telling me now that I'm hysterical to expect more from our leaders. 100%. Again, who predicted this shit? Wasn't Democratic leadership. It wasn't the neoliberal establishment. It wasn't corporate media. It was the left calling this shit out well ahead of time. Okay. Oh, here we go. Here is what I will do everything I can would look like from a president of the United States. I didn't hear everything I can. All right, let's see. Let's see his argument here. I think I quoted this back when he posted this in a different video, but the Hyde Amendment is not an excuse to do nothing to protect abortion rights. The federal government still has power to protect abortion rights, and it's time the Biden administration used it. All right. I'm not going to read all this because it appears to be very long and we'll be here all day. But let's see if I can find, because I think I did quote this before, if I can find the important parts. All right. The Hyde Amendment was proposed in 1976, 3 years after the landmark decision of Roe v. Wade by Illinois Representative Henry Hyde, a white male Republican who didn't like abortion rights. He proposed a rider to the funding bill for the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, now called the Department of Health and Human Services, that prohibited federal Medicaid funds from being used to pay for women to get abortions. The amendment passed both houses of Congress, and has been a feature of every budget bill since. The amendment and its modern versions prevent people enrolled in Medicaid or other government-run programs from using those insurance dollars for abortion procedures, except in the cases of rape or incest, or in the case where the life of the mother is at risk. The Hyde Amendment-esque language has since been inserted into a number of healthcare bills, including the Affordable Care Act. That's it. That's the whole thing. This is not to say the Hyde Amendment isn't a smoldering hunk of misogynist garbage that restricts access to abortion for millions of mostly poor women, often with the complicity of the Democratic Party, which is ostensibly elected to protect impoverished people. But this boogeyman the Democrats argue constrains the commander-in-chief from providing health care to U.S. citizens is not and has never been some insurmountable prohibition on federal government action. The idea that the Hyde Amendment restricts all federal action for abortion services is a clear misreading of the amendment. The Hyde Amendment does not, for instance, prevent the government from allowing people in federal prisons to seek abortion services. It does not prevent people being held in immigration custody from being allowed to seek abortion services. And the astute reader will notice that exceptions in the case of rape and incest are written right into the regulation. It is simply inaccurate to say that the amendment in its current form prevents the federal government from doing anything that could lead to an abortion. The Hyde Amendment is about insurance coverage. Those are just the facts. What one should do with the knowledge of those facts is open for interpretation. What one should do with knowledge of those facts while in charge of the executive branch of government is still another thing. I will stipulate that everything I am about to say will be disputed by Republicans. If that matters to you, I do not know how to help you. Do not allow my thinking to be cabled within the confines of what Republicans agree with, because my desire to live in a pluralistic society built on justice and equality outweighs my desire to be liked by the New York Times. But in my opinion, this now boilerplate budget amendment cannot prevent the might of the executive office from fighting for women's rights. Here are 4 obvious workarounds. Make everything free. So, understanding again, Biden and his power right now. This is what he could have been discussing in his speech and what he could be doing. As I read the Hyde Amendment, it does not prevent the federal government from providing, I'm losing my voice now, providing space for family planning consultations given by doctors who are leasing the space out of their own pockets. It does not prevent private citizens from funding or reimbursing those doctors for their consultation services through private means. Because medical privileges are generally governed by state law, not federal law, it might require different executive actions to allow doctors to perform actual medical procedures in those leased federal buildings. But that has nothing to do with the Hyde Amendment. Moreover, the amendment would not prevent those privately funded doctors from providing vacations for patients to states that do allow the necessary medical procedures to be performed. I chip in money to help every expectant mother visit New York until fetal viability, just because it's so nice here. Excuse me. So basically, these are all potential workarounds for what is now illegal in many states. Make the military do it. For better or worse, Biden's power as commander-in-chief is at its apex. The Hyde Amendment is not what prevents military doctors or doctors deputized into military service from performing abortion services. Instead, there are a number of other funding restrictions passed annually as part of the defense budget, as well as some restrictions made up by President Ronald Reagan and carried forward that make getting an abortion while an active duty member of the military very hard. It's even hard for service members to use their own money to seek legal abortion services from non-military doctors. However, Biden is the commander-in-chief. He should have already been using his power to make abortions easier to obtain in the military and must do so now. If the president begins to order military doctors to provide health care, there is little that funding riders could do to stop him. If the president orders the military to protect on their basis abortion providers giving out services for free, or to provide safe passage for women seeking abortions in other states, there is nothing congressional funders can do to stop him. All right, so far we have make everything free. We have make the military do it. These are, again, powers that Biden has as a workaround using the Hyde Amendment, or repealing it in this case. Repeal the Hyde Amendment. Republicans would challenge these actions and their enforcement goons on the Supreme Court, who are eager to force people to carry pregnancies to term would surely back them up. Okay, so to be clear, the the Hyde Amendment does not technically restrict the federal government from funding abortion. They try to claim it does, but in fact it does not. So there are potential workarounds here because of that. Be it make it free, be it make the military do it, or repeal it altogether. So let me read this again. Republicans would challenge these actions and their enforcement goons on the Supreme Court, who are eager to force people to carry pregnancies to term, would surely back them up. But as I keep saying, Hyde is merely a budgetary amendment. Biden submitted a 2022 budget that didn't include the Hyde Amendment, but caved. So it initially didn't have it, but he caved and added it. The 2023 budget proposal also doesn't have a Hyde Amendment attached. If Biden, a lifelong supporter of the Hyde Amendment until he ran for president a third time, thinks the Hyde Amendment is so powerful that it constrains even basic executive or military actions, then maybe he could not fold like a chair when it comes up next time around. Biden could act now, get challenged in court, and basically have those challenges rendered moot by repealing the thing. Ignore the Hyde Amendment. Fourth option. I have, in good faith, offered credible reasons for why the Hyde Amendment shouldn't apply to a number of executive actions to provide abortion services so long as a Democrat is in the White House. However, another entirely rational play is simply to ignore the amendment. It's what Republicans would do. Indeed, the last time a Republican president couldn't get money from Congress to do something, Congress explicitly would not fund. Sorry, I read that weird. It's what Indeed, the last time a Republican president couldn't get the money from Congress to do something Congress explicitly would not fund, he just declared a national emergency and stole the money from the military budget. There's no reason Biden couldn't do that. The Supreme Court's errant ruling has created a national emergency and humanitarian crisis. Pregnant people will not be turned into mere incubators on my watch. I hereby create a national guard of doctors and will deploy them into the various states to provide health care. Boom! Forget Congress. Forget Manchin. 4 options right here. This one I like the best. Just do it. Ignore the amendment. Have these doctors in these states offer this. You are the president. You have the power to do this. But instead, vote harder. The point of all these suggestions is that Biden and the Democrats should use power maximally while they have it to prevent the atrocity of people being forced to give birth against their will. The argument that executive inaction is not only justified but required by a 1976 budget writer is intellectually dishonest and literal evidence that one doesn't perceive forced birth as a fundamentally illegitimate use of state power. Exactly. Understanding this is forced birth. This is a violation of women's rights. Use the power you have on the executive level to provide abortion services. And again, we're talking about, this is a legal scholar. This is all within a reading of the law that sure is not widely held, but it's not widely held because conservatives are the ones that are often the ones dictating how things are interpreted or how the media interprets it. But there you go. So for those saying, stop blaming Joe Biden. Again, Joe Biden didn't do it, but he's not doing anything to stop it or doing anything to help in the meantime while trying to get people to vote more. All right, let me get last super chats because I am stuffed up and I need to eat something. Where was I? Bahamut. I said that wrong, I think. Just every time Dems say it's not over, no, it is. Well, I wouldn't be that fatalistic about it, but no, I understand. Maybe for them, it's over. All right. Probably going to have to get off now. So we've explored this issue for 2 hours and 41 minutes, nonstop, no breaks. I got to go. But it's been fun. Glad you all showed up. Hit that like button, hit subscribe. I'll have more videos this weekend. Check out my previous videos on this, right? When this was first announced through a leak, I broke down a lot of this before. So just look up abortion or Roe v. Wade on my channel. You'll find it. And check out previous videos this week. I covered the Colombia election, which was a very hopeful. So if you want hope, check out what's happening in Latin America. So I covered the the election in Colombia. Let me see what else I covered this week. Union leader in the UK mashes media into a bowl of porridge. You got to watch that. Mick Lynch is incredible. So I discussed that a couple days ago. Joe Rogan loses it over Canada's effective gun laws. So I discussed what Canada has done with our gun laws and how it's been successful. And I used Joe Rogan as a jumping off point for a lot of that and his ridiculous commentary. John Fetterman clowns Dr. Oz, which is funny. It's funny I use that wording because a day later, he put out a tweet of a meme of a guy putting on a clown face, and it was quoting a Dr. Oz thing. But I never, of course, I was a little too early to that story. But if I had included that tweet in the story, it would have been even more literal. But Fetterman doing really well right now against Dr. Oz, at least in early polling. Let's hope that continues. And guess what? Fetterman, a very different kind of Democrat. He just destroyed in the primary. He is more on the progressive side. Isn't perfect. There's one issue in particular he is not good on. I discussed in that video. But he still is much different and speaks to a working class message. Is unafraid to back cannabis legalization. You know, he is hopefully what the future of the Democratic Party looks like in terms of their strategy of speaking to the working class. People like Fetterman, Nina Turner, that's what I want to see, going forward in the Democratic Party. And I think that's mostly this week. And I also covered, in case you missed it, Crystal Ball on Bill Maher's show. Did a fantastic job. Fantastic job. So check out that as well. All right. Thank you all for showing up. And thank you for all your support in this stream. I will... thank you for saying feel better. Cotina Span, thank you. I will try to feel better. I think I'll have videos going up this weekend, probably. I haven't shot anything, but as I said earlier, I was planning to shoot a video before this happened. So we will see. Keep to the channel, hit subscribe, follow. If you want to help me out, hit the join button, support the show, and become a member. This live stream, I'll keep public, but I did do a live stream last Friday that went private afterwards. So if you're on YouTube as a member, you hit join, go to the membership or the channels. No, sorry, the community tab. The community tab, as a member, you'll see it there. Or on Patreon, if you're a patron, you will see the post from last week's live stream. So you can check that out as well. All right. Thank you all for showing up, and stay strong. Keep fighting. I know things suck, but we have to keep fighting. Keep that hope. Better things are possible. Good things are happening in the world. Check out Latin America. Things are possible. Things are happening. But yes, what just happened is, of course, terrible. But don't let that get you down. Keep fighting. Keep at it. Thank you all for showing up. Goodbye.